So this session is focused on one community's attempt to make pipelines safer. Tomorrow we'll have a session that highlights 3 different communities and their community technical assistance grants they got from PHMSA and what they did with those. Today we get to dive deep into one particular community and hear from 3 different perspectives on what they did. So we've got someone from the local government perspective, a community advocate, and a pipeline operator. So I'm going to introduce them, and they're each going to speak for 15 or so minutes, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers afterwards. Michael Kent is the Hazardous Materials Ombudsman with Contra Costa County Health Services. Roger Smith is the president of the Alamo Improvement Association in Contra Costa County. And Pete Murphy is the operations manager for Kinder Morgan Pipelines. Michael?
Well, thank you, Samia. And sorry about that. Should I start over? Or doesn't matter. With my overall hope is that if you consider doing something like this in your community, that you think about looking up your local health department or local government to see if you want to get them involved. So again, I am Michael Kent. I am the Ombudsman for our county's Hazardous Materials Program and also staff to our county's Hazardous Materials Commission. And I'm going to talk about the unique role that I had in doing these workshops. But first, where is Contra Costa County? So Contra Costa County is in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's across the bay from San Francisco. We're along the shoreline of the Carquinez Straits leading in from the interior of California. About 1.1 million people in the county, and it's quite diverse. In the west, we have a Mediterranean climate ranging all the way in the east to more like Central Valley ag land. Now, excuse me, I work in Martinez, which is in the north there in the red, and just for reference, Roger lives in Alamo, which is down in the middle of the county in the center. And Martinez, it's a very interesting city. If you can read that, it's supposedly the birthplace of the martini. It's the home of John Muir, the founder of the Sierra Club. And then, but also, it's a heavily industrialized county. This is the view from my doctor's office of the Shell oil refinery. And in fact, we have 4 oil refineries in Contra Costa County, represented there by the stars in the west, CHEVRON, and then we have a Phillips 66, a Shell refinery in Martinez, and just east of Martinez, we have the Tesoro refinery. We also have about 9 power plants in the county. We're sort of the industrial or energy hub of the county, as well as a number of other chemical plants in the county. And so, not surprisingly, because we have all this industry, we have a lot of oil and gas pipelines as well. And the pipeline that we're concerned about today is the one, the orange one running down the middle of the county from Martinez to Alamo. And as a result of having so much industry in Contra Costa County, unfortunately over the years, we've also had a lot of industrial accidents. This is a picture of the most recent major incident we've had at the Chevron oil refinery in Richmond in 2012, where they had a operational pipe thin due to sulfur corrosion, leak a lot of oil and explode. But in the mid-90s, we had quite a few accidents in the county in a succession. And unfortunately, the county health department at the time, who was responsible for doing hazmat response in our county, didn't do a very good job of communicating to the public what was going on during the incidents, or also what they were doing in response to make sure those incidents didn't happen again. And so a number of environmental organizations in the county asked our County Board of Supervisors to create an ombudsman position for our hazardous materials program to improve communication with the public. And one of those groups was a environmental group that I had previously worked for. And so in 1998, the county hired me to be the ombudsman for their hazardous materials program, partially because I had worked for a nonprofit environmental organization and understood things from their perspective, but I'd also spent 5 years working as a hazardous waste inspector for a local health department up in Washington State. And so I had a pretty good understanding of how regulatory programs worked as well. And so I started in 1998 as the ombudsman for the program, and the position was actually codified in our industrial safety ordinance, our accident prevention ordinance. And so I'm just going to quickly read what my charge was. It's to serve as a single point of contact for people who live or work in the county regarding environmental health concerns, questions, and complaints about hazardous materials programs. I'm empowered to identify and solve problems, make recommendations, and my role is one of investigating concerns and complaints, facilitating the resolution, and assisting people in gathering information about programs, procedures, and issues. And I can retain appropriate technical experts, and get that funding through grants. And overall, as my positions evolved over the years, I see my role as really helping people be good advocates for themselves. And I do this in a number of ways, working with individuals and with a number of groups, both in our county and regionally. And one of my roles to do this, you'll hear later, was working with Roger and putting on these workshops. But another one of my roles is to staff our county's Hazardous Materials Commission. And the Hazardous Materials Commission, it's been around since 1986, probably unique in California because we have so much hazardous materials in our county. It was originally developed to work on our county's hazardous waste management plan. We have 13 members, representatives from industry, environmental groups, organized labor, our Conference of Mayors, and several others. And they've worked on a range of issues over the years. Our industrial safety ordinance, which has a land use permitting and an accident prevention side, our county's community warning system for chemical incidents, environmental justice issues, brownfield cleanups, household hazardous waste disposal, issues around policy related to the precautionary principle, and pipeline safety. So this isn't the first time pipeline safety issues have come up in our county. In 2004, we had a pipeline rupture because workers misinformation about where that pipeline was located, and 5 workers were killed. Also, because of the San Bruno incident across the bay, there's quite a lot of interest in our county around pipeline safety. So our Hazardous Materials Commission was well aware of pipeline safety concerns in the county. And so a couple of years ago, the county supervisor from this District 2, which includes Alamo, came to the commission and asked for our input on some pipeline safety issues that were being raised in Alamo. And that red line represents the Kinder Morgan pipeline that there were questions about. There were both questions about safety, if that pipeline was safe enough, but also concerns around people encroaching upon the pipeline. And so that county supervisor asked us to weigh in on that, asked the commission to weigh in on that, and they got involved in that. And through that, I did some public presentations in the Alamo area. And one of the things I mentioned was that the Department of Transportation have these technical assistance grants that are available to community groups, and that's what got Roger involved. And that's because my role as ombudsman is to help people be good advocates for themselves. I helped Roger with that process. And then the Hazardous Materials Commission eventually was also brought in because one of their missions is public education around environmental hazardous materials issues. So Roger's going to talk a little bit more about the process of doing the workshops. So I'm not going to talk about that too much, but I wanted to spend the rest of my time just talking from my perspective what some of the key lessons were, the opportunities and the challenges from doing these workshops with the Alamo Improvement Association and with Kinder Morgan. So for us, key lessons learned, and this is both for me as in my role as ombudsman and also for the Hazardous Materials Commission. One thing I think is, being proactive is always better than being reactive. I've facilitated a whole bunch of community meetings in our county right after there's been a fire or a release of chemicals from an industrial facility. And that is not really a good time to have a reasonable discussion about what you can do better. People are really upset. People are angry, people are trying to assign blame, industries can sometimes be defensive, and that's not the time to have a good conversation. And so holding these workshops at a time when there hadn't just been an incident was a good time for everybody to be able, I think, to come together and talk about these issues without the sort of emotional aspect of having something had just happened. And maybe this isn't a lesson learned, but a lesson reinforced. Collaboration is still the way to go. You know, as far as putting workshops on, I could have gone and put on a couple of workshops myself with far less time and far less energy invested, but I wouldn't have gotten nearly as good a product. There's just value in collaboration. You bring in more perspectives. From the community's perspective, having a local person and a local organization involved, it really increases your level of trust and your level of participation. And so even though sometimes collaboration can be harder and take more time, it's still the way to go. Thirdly, again, a lesson reinforced, trust what residents tell you. If they tell you they're concerned about something, you know, believe that, talk about that, listen to what they say. Don't try to patronize people and come in and talk about what you think they ought to know. Ask them what they need to know. And so being involved with the Alamo Improvement Association, we knew what they wanted to know and talk a little bit about whether we actually answered all their questions. But you know, it's important to respond to what people are talking about and telling you. And then finally, preparation actually pays off. As Roger will describe, we had a series of meetings amongst the stakeholders to put these workshops on, and they were very much the better for it. And so it's always important, I think, to put the time in when you're doing these workshops for residents. You know, if you're not prepared, people see that, and I think it affects their willingness to hear your message. And so that's really important. In terms of opportunities, I thought there are a number of opportunities that come out of doing workshops like this. For the Hazardous Materials Commission, it furthered the opportunity for them to do community education. We've done community workshops in the past on the precautionary principle, on trying to figure out how to address cumulative impacts, on home-generated pharmaceutical disposal. And so this for them was, you know, again, a good educational opportunity. So I think they very much appreciated the request from the Alamo Improvement Association to co-sponsor these workshops. As you'll hear, the Pipeline Safety Trust has prepared a report that has a number of recommendations based on their looking at what's going on in our county for our Board of Supervisors, our departments, and others to look at. And the Hazardous Materials Commission is reviewing that report right now. And so we'll have some opportunities to go to our Board of Supervisors and tell them if we think they ought to pursue some of these recommendations or not. So it's an opportunity for us to potentially improve safety in the community. Third, we got a lot of requests right after their report came out from other county supervisors saying, you know, so where's the workshop in my district? And so it's going to be an opportunity to further this work in other parts of our county. And I mentioned that it's also a challenge, and I'll explain why in a second. And then finally, I think it opens the door to future collaboration. Now, I'm not sure what that collaboration is going to be, but you know, now I know Pete a lot better, I know Roger a lot better, I know the state fire marshal a lot better, and someday down the road, something's going to come up and we're going to want to work together, and having done this before is going to help that. And you know, I think I participate in a lot of emergency response drills. And I think virtually every drill I've gone to, what people say is the best thing they got out of it was meeting the other people that they were in, that they might have to respond to an incident with. Because they say the last time you want to meet somebody, the worst time to meet somebody you're going to have to fight a fire with or you know, address an emergency with is during that emergency. So knowing people ahead of time, I think just opens up doors to possible future collaboration. And that's, you know, don't know what that's going to be, but I know it's going to pay off someday down the road. And then finally, what are some of the challenges of doing workshops like this? Well, like I mentioned, it is time intensive, and so there's always a resource issue about doing it more than once throughout the county. A second challenge for us, and I think the other speakers are going to talk about this as well, is being clear about what we want from our presenters and coordinating those messages. I don't know if it's maybe a little strong to say we did Pete a disservice, but I don't know if we expressed to him as well as we could have what we were hoping for him to cover at those workshops. And that's always really important because, I have a vision in my mind, Roger had a vision in his mind. Pete has to kind of be a little bit of a mind reader, and we could have always done a good job of that. But the better you can do that, it really pays off in the end. And then also we had the state fire marshal at these workshops as well, and they and Pete from Kinder Morgan covered some of the same material, and it's always good and it's always important to make sure you do as little of that for your audience as possible so that they don't get bored. And hopefully we're not going to repeat that same mistake here today. Did we address what people wanted to know? My experience is, as in regard to industrial safety, is, what people in the end really want to know is, are we doing everything possible to prevent accidents? And when I say we, I mean government and industry. And are we prepared to respond to accidents if they do happen? And I think in these workshops, we focused a lot on what we're doing to prevent accidents. And as we did the workshops and we got feedback, and I got feedback afterwards, I think we kind of forgot about the part, and we maybe assumed in our own minds that, well, we're pretty confident that we know what to do if there is an incident, but maybe we didn't talk about that as much with people. And so try as you might to answer the questions you think people want to hear the answer to. It's really a hard thing to do to strike that right balance. And so you always have to work really hard to hear what people are asking for. And then finally, our future challenges. As a county, if we actually implement some of the recommendations that the Pipeline Safety Trust is asking us to, it's going to be fairly resource intensive and time intensive. We're going to have to develop expertise that we currently don't have, and that'll be a challenge. And so it's really going to be a political decision if pipeline safety issues raise to the level of making that investment. But that'll be a challenge. In our county, it's a growing county, has been for many years, and so we have encroachment issues. And that's going to be a future challenge. Just people, not just moving in, but people who live along the pipeline, sort of extending their backyards out. And then the growing population really, we do have people moving in and making sure that we don't make problems worse by siting housing near the pipelines. And then I'd like to end with the issue I mentioned that was an opportunity as well as a challenge, and that is in terms of doing these elsewhere. And this isn't meant to take away from the importance of the safety concerns in the Alamo area, but that's just one area of the county, and it's actually a fairly well-off area with lots of very well-educated people like Roger. But we have many other parts of our county where pipelines run through and where industry is that aren't as fortunate. We have several large pockets of low-income minority communities. And we really have to be very cognizant, I think, that we make sure those resources are available to those communities as well to do these types of workshops. And so I've been thinking and talking to people at the conference from the agency about how we can make sure to get those grants into those communities, and that we are thinking about making sure that the education and outreach that we're doing is spread evenly throughout the county, or equitably at least, and that we're not just responding to the people that come to us, but that we're going out and making sure that everyone everywhere is getting this information and being involved in these sorts of decisions. So that's a challenge for me in particular, but for the county as a whole, and for the other agencies that we work with.